Welcome, Jason. Jason's been working with me on events for 18 years or something. Um, Glad to have you back. Jason works at Infragistics, and Jason, I have started the recording, so you're good to go.
All right.
And then if everybody could keep themselves muted, I see G. Abraham is still. No, that's good. The only one that should have his thing on is Jason, the only one that should be presenting, and his co-presenter.
All right.
So go ahead, and when you're done, Jason, if you could upload your slides to the file area, then people can copy them as they see fit.
Yep, I will do that. Thank you. Yep, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Okay, so we'll kick this off. Yeah, George Abraham as well is a co-presenter with me today. So thanks everyone for coming. I know there's a lot of good options, but it's all recorded, so all the sessions can be viewed, it seems. So that's pretty slick. So today we're going to talk about building web apps blazing fast, and this is using some tooling from Infragistics. If you stay till the end of the talk, you'll see how you can kind of get these tools for free. So you don't have to pay for them. So you suffer through this presentation and you get a bonus. But at the end of the day, what we really want to do is help developers be more productive. So my name is Jason Beres. I've been at Infragistics for 18 years. George Abraham is with me as well today. He's been at Infragistics for, I think, 9 or 11 years now. And he has a PhD in human-computer interaction and has been building user experience tools at our company for over a decade. And my experience is being around not quite as long as Bill, but almost. So I've been doing this for about 30 years, and at Infragistics for the last almost 20, building tooling. So building UI components, building tools for developers to help them use those components better and faster. And you're going to see a couple things today that will help you do that. So today, what we want to show you is 2 ways that you can be more productive building modern web apps. And what this means is that when you think about a modern web app today, a lot of it, not even today, I mean, since 2011 when jQuery, or 2010 when jQuery really started to become super popular, you're looking at a lot of hand coding. So Microsoft has Visual Studio. You have a Wysiwyg when you're doing a WPF or a Windows Forms app, or even coming from Visual Basic or earlier. And the productivity from those tools was really high. With the web, productivity sort of tanks because there is a lot of manual work. There's a lot of hand coding, and it's a lot of stuff that's error prone, hard to debug, etc. And if you've built enterprise web applications, you know this. The hard part about a real enterprise web application is the front end is a completely different mental model than the back end, where you might be using C# and you might be building services that are just consumed by the front end. So there's this real tension in productivity. So we have a CLI that helps do this for React apps, Angular apps, jQuery apps, soon Blazor apps in terms of the CLI. But we've also introduced a new tool. It's a Wysiwyg drag and drop tool, which allows you to literally just go back to the old days where, hey, I want to build an application. Here's my toolbox. Here's my canvas. Let me drag a bunch of stuff off and then give me my code. And so that's you're going to see that today. And that is in a preview today. It's like a sort of a mid-term of its beta life cycle. It's going to be released later this year. But if you stay till the end, I have an email that you can send me to get a free license of that product with a little caveat. So the 2 things we're going to talk about today is a product called Ignite UI and a product called Indigo Design. Ignite UI is a set of web UI components that cover Angular, React, pure web components from the web component standard, Blazor, jQuery. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can use to build out apps. And then we have a tool called Indigo Design, which is a cloud-based UX tool, which does prototyping, markup, redline, code generation, collaboration, and this new Wysiwyg tool is part of that. So these products work together because you're designing something and then you want to get code. And that's the big thing. We talk a lot about design to code. And so what is design to code? Design to code means I have a design from a design team, and I need to somehow make my app look like this. And this has always been the struggle. And if you're a rich client developer, it's a big struggle because the designers or marketing or someone gives you a mock-up in Photoshop, and then you need to figure out what tools to use to actually get your product to look like that, you know. And as a developer, it's hard to do that, and it's always been hard, and tooling now is sort of making it much easier, and that's sort of where we're at today. And why is this so important? So the big thing here is that Gartner does all this research with enterprises, and they've determined that over 60% of dev time is spent on the user interface. So that means that, you know, if you look at a product taking 6 months to build, you're going to spend 3 to 4 months just on the UI. And the nice thing about software development today is that there's so much information out there, and most of us are fairly seasoned on that, on the C# or Java side. So when you're writing your backend and you're writing your services, that's not always the hardest part, maybe like it was 10 years ago or more. That stuff is simpler. Your business logic maybe is more well-defined. It's that user interface that ends up being more difficult. And we're not going to go into this talk around you know, user experience design and how you should have agile design sprints and all this other stuff. But all of this goes to the point that if you're spending 60% of time on anything, that's where you're going to find most of your issues downstream, like after you deploy. And that's where you're going to have most of your struggles up front. And so how can we alleviate that time spent up front on basic stuff like layout and data binding, and, you know, how things are going to look from a CSS perspective? And then how can we you know, eliminate bugs downstream? So the certainty in your outcome is a higher degree of certainty. Positive certainty is when you can automate as much of that as possible, and that's really what we're trying to do. So we do a lot of user research. You know, Infragistics has been in business for 30 years. You know, we have over 1 million customers over that 30-year period. And at any given time, there's 50 or 60,000 teams around the world building product with Infragistics. And we get all these analytics, we get a lot of data. And so what does that data tell us, and what do our surveys tell us? That code reuse delivers significant cost savings. So if you look at a product license that might cost $1,000 a year, it delivers $100,000 in return on productivity for a developer. And productivity meaning getting up to speed, not writing bugs, not having to test everything themselves, because we're doing a lot of that testing on our components. And then it really significantly reduces the time to build an application. So to build a screen and get that screen to look good is critical. So if you think about this $100,000 number, and you just say, hey, what does that $100,000 number mean in terms of me just like reading your docs or trying to learn a new technology or platform? Think about the amount of time you spend fixing bugs after your products are released in code that potentially you could have not written yourself or had someone else written in a component. So for example, we have a data grid control, and I'm going to show you that in a minute, but we have like 35 or 40,000 tests that run against that one control every time code is checked in. So the scale to which we can test scenarios is much greater than you as a small shop, maybe of 5 or 10 devs, or even a big shop of hundreds or thousands of developers. And then the cost to actually fix a bug is significant. So when you're doing prototyping and the design team has to fix a design bug, which means they've shown a design to someone and they want to change something, that costs about $1 to fix. When you're in the development process, that same bug, once the code is written, costs anywhere from $10 to $30 to fix. Once you release, that bug costs anywhere from $100 to $1,000 to fix. And if you've been on a team that delivered software, let's say 3 to 5 years ago, you already know today you're spending most of your time doing maintenance and not new development. And at Infragistics, we know this because we have products that have been in market for over 20 years. And when you have a product in market over 20 years, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into that. So anyway, this is where you do get a lot of value in these tools, which is often you look at a price tag and you're like, oh my God, is that really worth it? But then if you look at the downstream cost savings, you end up with a significant cost savings longer term. So looking at these controls, this is the stuff I'm going to show today and George is going to show today. And it's not like, oh, we're going to show you how a chart or a grid looks. We're going to show you how to just make them really fast. So you don't have to write the code to actually do this. But the whole point is you will all get a license for this. I have a link at the end. But these components are Angular, React, web components. We just shipped a Blazor product. Today, we're going to talk a lot about Angular because a lot of our productivity tooling right now is geared towards Angular because that market's so big. We've seen in the last, what we've seen in the last 3 years is Angular has just taken off, especially in the enterprise where you have teams that used to do .NET or maybe that still do .NET. Angular has been sort of put in there as their new front end product. And talking to Microsoft, this was a solid 2 years ago, so the data might be slightly different today, but they said the biggest file new in what they track in Visual Studio was an Angular front end and a web API backend, using Entity Framework, building web APIs in C#. So Angular ended up being very popular, and that's why there's templates and all that stuff in Visual Studio. But at the same time, many people are using Angular. And then the other one that is just really exciting and popular is Blazor. And Blazor is getting a lot of attention today. In fact, from Infragistics perspective, this has the most inquiries in the last 6 months in terms of sales, like people saying, hey, what's going on with Blazor? Hey, what are you seeing in the market with Blazor? All this stuff about Blazor. So Blazor is very exciting. It is C#. It's great for the .NET developer, and Philly.net is, you say, oh man, Philly.net, are we going to have .NET in 5 years? We're going to have .NET for another 50 years. Bill will be retired, and we'll still be talking about .NET for decades. And that's what's exciting about the whole Blazor story. And then even moving forward with WinUI and some of the stuff that's happening there, there's a lot of cool things going on. So with these tools comes this CLI, and this is what I'm going to demo right now, is basically a wizard-driven command line to create apps. And it alleviates so much pain from getting started. So anyone on the call today that's not an Angular dev, and if after you see this, you're going to be like, you know what, this could be fairly approachable to me. If I don't have to really learn all of this minutia just to get started. And then as you start to use a new platform like Angular, you start to learn about all these little things. And then after maybe 3 months, you're like, okay, yeah, let's go into app module and see what's going on there, or go to this file and make sure those dependencies are there, or this is how we inject this component. All these things become secondhand, but you have to learn first. And there's nothing worse going through the learning process and not being somewhat successful, within a reasonable amount of time with something to see. And we all know how this feels. So I'm going to go right into a demo. And what I'm going to show you today is, so there's something that you can check out yourself. I'm going to go to npmjs.com. And just so you know, like kind of how all this is tied together in terms of what I'm going to talk about. Our product is called Ignite UI, and what I'm going to use is this thing called the Ignite UI CLI, command line interface. And what this guy does is it is a wizard in a DOS window essentially that asks you a bunch of questions, and then you will just get your project in your code after this. If you're not familiar with how the web CLIs work, you need Node.js installed. Just go to nodejs.com and install it. And then you're going to grab this command here and install this into your folder. So I actually created a folder called C:\PHL. And if I wanted to install the CLI, I would just type npm I, or npm install Ignite UI CLI and hit enter. And then it goes off to the web, it grabs a bunch of packages, and I'm ready to go. So I've already done this today, so I'm not going to do it again. And by the way, if I did it again, it would just say, hey, you've already done this, so why are you doing it again? And then what we've done with this CLI is we created a little shortcut called IG. So all you got to do is type in IG, and then it kicks off this wizard. Now, the first thing you'll see in this wizard is it says there's a different Ignite UI global and a local version. The cool thing about npm and the way the web works on your local dev machine is there's all these little commands like, this is for dev, I want to save all my dependencies, do all this other stuff, but you can install that CLI globally. So if I typed in IG, it would work anywhere on any folder or just the folder that you're working in. So what I did today, just to make sure my demos worked, is I installed the latest in this folder. Globally, I have a version that's 2 versions old, and I just haven't done the npm update yet, which, maybe I'll do, but I was afraid to do it because I don't want the demo gods to get me. So what I'm going to do is say enter a name for your project, and so I'll just say, Philly Code Camp. And then it's going to ask me what framework do I want to use. Do I want to use Angular, jQuery, or React? For this demo, I'm going to use Angular. And then we have 2 flavors for this, Ignite UI for Angular, or we have wrappers around our jQuery product. So if you're a jQuery shop and you want to start doing Angular bindings, you can use our jQuery wrappers. So let me do Ignite UI for Angular. And then there's a few options here that I have. I can just do an empty project, and what that's going to do is it's going to create an empty Angular project and then add the Infragistics dependencies for Ignite UI. So then I can use the grids and the charts, or I can do a couple preset patterns that we have. So a side navigation with a login, or a default side navigation. I'm going to do the default side nav. I'm going to use our default theme. And so now what it's done is it's actually generated a project structure. So here I'm going to slide my monitor over and go to PHL. Move this like this. So what you'll see here is that it's created this folder called Code Camp 1. I'm sorry, Philly Code Camp. That's the project we're doing now. Now, if I open this up, it's created an Angular project. And in that Angular project, all of my Infragistics stuff is ready to go. I've got my source folder, my app. There's really nothing here, but I've got authentication set up, routing, a home page. So if I just did a run on this now, I would have an Angular app, which is pretty slick. So let me minimize that and let's keep going. What I want to do is I want to add a component. I'm going to add a grid. I'll add a grid, and I want to do a custom grid, and I'm going to call this grid 1. And in my grid, I want sorting, filtering, editing, row editing, group by, resizing. I want everything. So I'm just going to select all these options. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to add another component. I want to add a chart. Let's add a financial chart. I'm going to call it financial chart 1. And then I want to add a scenario. Now, this is what's interesting. Scenarios are templates. You as a company can add whatever templates you want, and they'll show up here in this list. So this CLI is extensible. So if you have XYZ company and you want a certain branding with a certain login or a certain type of whatever screens, your devs don't even have to worry about it. They can just go here, pick it, and boom, it'll get auto-generated. So let's do a FinTech tree grid. I'll do a FinTech grid, and I'll call it FinTech grid. And I am going to complete and run. So now this also says, hey, are you a customer? If you're not, don't worry about it. But if you are, fill in your email, and then you get our licensed packages, which don't have a trial version. But I'm just going to say skip that for now. What port do I want to use? 4200 is fine. And so now what it's doing is it's got all this information. It's going to go off, install everything. And what we'll see in my folder as that's happening is I have new stuff that just magically appeared. I got financial chart 1, FinTech grid 1, etc. It's installing all of the required dependencies from the web for this. If you've ever done Angular, you know this, sometimes takes a minute. And And then it's going to build this, and then it's going to run this. So you'll see it's done it all. It's built it. It's doing an ng serve on port 4200. And then in a second, this will actually pop up. Actually, it's still compiling. Sorry. And we'll give this a little bit, blah, blah, blah. Let it go. More code's getting written or getting plastered out here. What happens in Angular, if there's any Angular devs, this node modules folder is just getting splatted with everything Angular needs. So this might look like a lot, but like, you know, the Acorn dependency might be 4 lines of code. You know, Angular is an open source platform, so it uses all the open source it can possibly use in the whole wide world to make it work. And then what's happening now is this process called tree shaking. So this folder might end up being 500 megabytes, but then your app boils down during this compilation using Webpack into a 50 kilobyte or 100 KB application that then would get deployed. So don't get nervous about, oh my God, this is going to kill my app or productivity. That's just the way Angular works. So that's still building. You know what I'm going to do? I am going to right click here, and I'm going to open this with Visual Studio Code just to get that going. Oh, and by the way, it's opening, so it's compiled and it's ready to go. So now the nice thing is it automatically, when you do an ngserve-o, it means open, so it actually opened my project. So now I'll click grid. It actually created this grid for me. The grid has a bunch of different features. It's beautiful, looks good, and I can do stuff with it like edit fields and, you know, whatever, pin columns, show and hide columns, etc. I also have a financial chart now, so here's my financial chart. It's doing some nice stuff. I can add some indicators and Bollinger Bands, and let me add, let's actually change it to a line chart. So again, all of this happens with just the CLI. So now I can actually really get started. And then here's a richer grid. This is that FinTech grid template that I showed you. And you can see you've got a bunch of features here. I can do a bunch of stuff at the column level, like pin columns. I can sort. I can add more data to this grid. So we can add like 7,000 rows just to see how well it performs. It's got interactive grouping. So now if I really wanted to get started, I could, like I just did, open up Visual Studio Code here. And actually, let me slide it over. And this is what the CLI just did. It created an app folder. It created this financial chart. Move this over. Here's the HTML for the chart. So super easy to get started. It looks like I just need this financial chart tag. Now let's look at the code behind. The code behind is actually looking for a Amazon data set from the data folder. So it's really easy to sort of follow, or actually the data file, which is right here. So this is the data that it's actually binding. So it's really easy to follow this, and you can see that there's not much code to actually do a financial chart. If I look at the grid, here's the grid component, IGX grid. I'll expand this out. I'm binding to some local data. We've defined some columns here. There's some templates, so you can learn how to do that. If I look at the TypeScript, really nothing here. We're just binding to our local data. And then we'll see the same thing with everything that we're doing. But now if I scroll back down to all of the other stuff that the Angular project needs to run, this is where you can really see some of the benefit to what's going on. So all of these import statements, all of the specific libraries that are needed, all of this is done automatically. So all of these things are what's necessary to actually build this sample that has like 5 screens. It has some navigation, etc. Normally you'd have to sort of read the docs and figure this out, but a CLI will give you this benefit very quickly. This has all of the routing built in, so you don't have to worry about how does routing actually work? Oh, I can actually just add a new component, add another path, and then it's going to just sort of work for me. So all of this is done for you. You'd have to figure all this out yourself or kind of learn it. So what we're trying to do is really accelerate that learning curve and get you code super, super fast. So a CLI is one way for that to actually happen. The other way that we want to do the next demo on is something that we're calling the app builder. So we think this is even more compelling in terms of how you can very quickly get apps blazing fast. So this is what George is going to demo next, and it's really about, I want to do drag and drop. The CLI is great, but there's still too much for me to figure out and learn. And maybe the templates aren't there. Maybe it doesn't work exactly how I want. Is there other tooling? So this is a unique tool in the market for dev teams to build business apps. And it really is just a Wysiwyg. And again, going back to the same thing, there are no good tools like this. And the tools that do this don't give you good code. So like you can go find a plugin for somewhere that says, hey, we'll generate some code for you, but it's a lot of primitives, lines, not real backed by real components. And that's kind of the strength. We've got the components and we've got the tooling. So it just kind of makes your life a little bit easier. So the way this works is that it's a cloud-based Wysiwyg. You don't have to install anything. You can see that you've got templates, layouts to get started. So if I don't know what I want to build, or I really don't know how I want to start, you can very quickly just select something and get going in no time. Of course, we have all the UI components. So there's a toolbox where you're literally just dragging and dropping tools onto a design surface. And all what's happening is your Angular code or your Blazor code or your React code is getting generated in the background. And then theming ends up being something really important. So we have a whole theming story built in. But the idea is you can create your own custom themes with your own colors or fonts, or you can use one of our built-in themes. And then obviously this is all about saving you dev time. So what do you get? You get code. So not only can you view the code in real time, like I just want to see what the heck does this code actually look like, you can download the code into a zip file, do exactly what I just did, npm or ngserve-o, and boom, your app compiles and it starts and you're ready to go. So that is the cool thing. And as you're watching this, this demo from George, let me bring up one slide here. I think this is the slide. Hold on, let me find the slide that I want to bring up. Okay, so this is what I really wanted you guys to realize when you look at this product and the bonus here. So write down this email, feedback@indigo.design. And if you think this is cool and you want to try it out, it's a beta right now. We're going to release it in a couple months. But if you want to use this thing for free with all these UI controls, send us a design and give us feedback, because that's what we need. Like, we want to hear how you want to build your enterprise apps with this Wysiwyg. And then if all you got to do is send an email with some screenshots and maybe a quote like, hey, this thing was awesome, or this thing sucked, whatever. Here's 3 crappy things you guys need to fix. Here's 2 awesome things we liked. We need all that feedback. But feedback at Indigo Design, and everyone gets a free license. That's really would be really valuable to us. So with that, I am going to let George share his screen, and he's going to walk you through this product and show you how it works. So George, you can take it away.
Excellent.
Yep, I can hear you and I can see your screen.
Perfect. So as Jason was saying, CLI is an excellent way to get started very quickly, but we want to give you something more visual, which allows you to kind of design these apps directly in the web using a drag and drop designer. And there's a bigger story here. And the bigger story is that most apps which have great experience, they actually work because you have collaborated with the right stakeholders, the design team is involved, your business team is involved. And we want to provide a space where anybody can access that particular design and not be siloed by the tooling somebody is using. So designers are using design tools, developers are using something like VS Code, and the stakeholders are like, okay, when can I see what you guys are working on, and how do we make that really easy? And that's where the bigger Indigo.design design to code story fits in, is that the app builder is going to be part of Indigo.design. And with that, you also get collaboration and user testing on top of it. So in today's presentation, I'm not going to cover that aspect of it, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what the bigger story is. So as Jason was saying, the fastest way for you to prove out what this value is you can come in here. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to come into the main menu, say create a new app. And then we have some sample apps which actually show how the layouts have been done. And then you can pick one of those sample apps, which is what I have in the background. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an end-to-end in like 2 or 3 minutes. And then I'm going to go down into some specifics or highlights of features or capabilities you can try yourself. So what you're seeing here is a design which is a sample. I have pulled it up so that just to show off that this is actually a web-based layout which does relative layouts, in this case Flex. And it tries to visualize this whole experience so that you can actually see that this left nav is comprised of other sub layouts, which are like column layouts or row layouts. And then on the left, we have this toolbox, which lets you cycle through all the components we have. And this is important because for us, it's almost like a design systems approach, which means that it's not just about visual design and it's not just about development tools. It's actually about both of them together. And that's what the design system really helps do. It helps you standardize across the team what designers would actually create and what developers are ready to deliver on. So this component list here, as Jason said, it's a public preview. We are actually building out new components as we speak. The toolbox lets you cycle through the components, the views, which are part of Angular. So you can have a master view, which has all the shared components, and you have those child views which sit under it. So in this case, I have this one, my tasks, which is like a team collaboration example, and then dashboards is another view. And they are basically injected under this master view. Then we have a story around data. Right now, we have a mock data source built in, but the idea is that you should be able to configure a REST API so that you can use data in your apps. And then we have a theming story, which allows you to skin this entire app with just one click. It's as simple as that. You do not have to go in and do localized styling for any of these pieces of this app, which allow you to really scale up your design process. Now, once you're done with components and layouts, you can actually hit the sample app and hit preview to see what exactly is generated in terms of your real app. And what you see here is exactly the app which we are going to generate in the future. And the beauty of this is that you can actually try it out, like all the capabilities which you have designed directly inside the preview so that you do not actually have to wait for the generated code, which is actually the design to code story, to actually see whether it's working out correctly or not. But even better, we generate the code side by side. So all the code Jason was actually showing you, which the CLI generates, it's exactly what you see here. So you can see for yourself that the code is clean, it's structural, and then you also see the CSS, which is being generated based on the design I have created here. And once you feel everything is working great, there is also navigation built in. The routing, which Jason mentioned, is also built into the product. And if you're ready, all you have to do is hit generate app, and that basically downloads a zip file. And when the zip file is downloaded, it also downloads additional files you would need in order to actually run this in VS Code, because that's the journey of this particular application. So what I've done here to show you quickly, to show this is all legit, I have VS Code. And what I've done is I've unzipped that folder which was downloaded. I've opened it up, and you can see this is all the files you would need for your Angular application. So this is the view, my task. This is the my task HTML, my tasks SCSS, and then all the other views which were part of this. So dashboards was another one of those things that's also being generated. And in order to run this, what I have done is I've gone into my terminal, hit npm install to get all the dependencies. Once that finishes, and the only other command I wrote was npm start. I'm just trying to find it here. Yeah, right here, npm start. And once this is done, it loads it up on your local host. And this is actually, you can see here, localhost my tasks, which is the routing, and it has already the routing implemented here. And if I show you what it looks like in the preview, this was the preview. Let me close out the code view here. And if I pull out the actual app which was compiled, you can say they are identical, pixel perfect. And this is the anxiety we want to completely resolve, is that you never have to worry about the fact that what was designed, would it look like that when the code is generated? And the benefit of this is that we have saved you time writing a ton of code, reviewing our design documentation, reviewing our developer documentation, in order to make sure that this is actually configurable easily. So this kind of a pixel perfection is what we are giving you, saving you time so that you can then go and focus on writing business logic and everything else which you need to do to actually build out this app, but never have to worry about design. Now that I've given you a big overview of how do you start with one of the sample apps, hit preview, code generate, open up in VS Code and run those two commands to actually compile this application, let me talk about some specific areas and capabilities what is offered by this app. So this is one example of the app I had created. This is another app I have here running in preview. You can see that it has support for all the components, which is like a drop down, select boxes. This is all built into the product because our components all belong together, which is why you get a cohesive look, across the application you create. So what I'm going to do is talk about 5 areas of this app, which I talked through very briefly, but I want to go into details. One is about layouts. The second thing is about what our component story looks like. The third thing is how you specify this routing and navigation, themes, and the code preview I already showed you. So let's just do that. I can go in here. And this is basically an empty app, which has 2 views under it, and there's a master view which has some basic navigation. I'm going to come back to this. So talking about layouts, what I've done here is I went in and just added a row layout. I just drag and drop it onto the design surface, and it creates a row layout with some basic properties. And inside this row layout, what I said is I set it to saying, okay, you know what? I don't want row layout. I can switch it at any time from a row to a column. And that's what I've done here. So if I set it to row, you can say that it relays out. Column would put it all in a column structure. And let's just quickly create the sign-in dialog, because all I need to do from here is select the parent and say, you know what, I want it in the center of my canvas. And all the flex settings, if you're not familiar with it, is actually presented to you visually so you understand how this thing is going to affect the design. So I can say set it to the center here and horizontally center it. And now my dialog, the so-called very tiny dialog in the center of the canvas, I can select the parent. So I selected it, select the sign in. I can just select the parent and say, you know what? I want you to have some width on it. And for the height, I'm not going to care because I have padding. So I can do padding on this property on this dialog, padding. And I also have multi-select, so I can just select a bunch of them and say, you know what? I want some margin, and I only want the margin on the bottom. And I can see here, I can say, hey, give me 16. And if I want to create layouts saying, okay, this wants to be side by side, I can do this after the fact by just selecting both of those things, right clicking, saying add to layout, and say, you know what, put them in a row layout. And Flex actually gives us capabilities to say, you know what, horizontally, I want you to space between. So it pushes them to the various, to the 2 edges. And now I have a sign-in dialog already created. And of course, I can style them with some basic properties here for appearance. So I can say, give me a border of 1 pixel. And that's it. My layout story is done. In terms of the component story, if you look at these input boxes I've added here, as I said before, it's a design system story, which means that we believe in offering design the same capabilities which we are offering development. But in order to our input boxes, which is coming from, say, Angular, they are actually pretty robust in terms of how they implement material. So you can have an icon in front of the input box, an icon on the end of the input box, placeholder text, all of these information. And if you look at the developer specification, and the reason I'm showing you this is because every component you're seeing on the design canvas, they are backed by components which are supported by developers, right? Which is not something anybody offers, is that we sell both of them independently. So you know that there is a developer documentation to back you up after you generate the code, right? So you're not just generating vanilla HTML and CSS. So for example, I want to recreate this nice little icon on the right side, and it should be spaced exactly like that. all I have to do in my app builder, select the input box, and I say, you know what? I do want a suffix, and I want a prefix. And on this one also, I want a suffix and prefix. So I say prefix. And in the prefix area, I say, you know what? This is supposed to be a password. So I want to go ahead and get a new icon. And all the material icons are baked in here. So I can say, give me a key. And that's it. It positions it exactly where it is. And this is how we can scale the design effort, right? Because you don't have to worry about how do you position this exact thing in a specific place. So you can see from the component story here, the property toolbox is actually designed in a very readable way and in a very structural way. So what that means is that, okay, you can have a text box and I want this to be of the type password. This is all built in, and it also generates code which we are completely confident that that's how it should be written in a component, and you get that for free, right? So if I want to add some help text, I can say, yeah, I want some help text, and I can say, make sure you have your caps lock off, and that's it, right? So now I have this positioned exactly right. The spacing is exactly right. The typography is exactly right. And these are the small things which add up very quickly in terms of a maintenance effort. So for the sign-in dialog, I can say, yeah, I want it in the center. And now I have my perfectly positioned dialog. And if I hit preview, it would look perfect because I know that's exactly how it looks in the design time. And it's the exact same thing you see in the preview. Now, in terms of the navigation, you see that when I'm designing the view, you don't see anything around it. But when I hit preview, you're actually seeing the app, how it's supposed to behave. For that, what we have done here in the views area, you can see there's a master view. There are layouts which are child views laying under it. I select the master view, and the master view actually has just a simple row layout with two buttons inside it, and they have been positioned just using HTML and positioning. And then we have something called a views container. And the views container is just a design time representation of something like a router or a router outlet. And how you add it, I can delete it completely. I can go into my toolbox and look for the views container. But we also have a faster way, which is like you can come in here and do Control E or Command E. And we have a quick add so that you actually never have to go and drag and drop either. I can say, give me a views container, and boom, it just adds the view container. It tries to scale and fit as much as it can. And inside the views container, I say by default, always show this particular view. And when I go to my button, I can add an interaction which says on click, navigate to layout. And on navigation, I have on click, navigate to positioning. Those are the two views I have under it. And that's about it. My routing is pretty much done, right? And you can have any level of complex kind of interaction. So this is showing a very simple top navigation. But we also have the nav bar component. So I can say I want a nav drawer, and it can add a navigation drawer, and you can position it to the left based on how you have it. And then you can add more nav items and use that for your navigation. Again, you do not actually have to worry about how it should look like because it's already designed perfectly out of the box. And that's the time saving with using a design system kind of an approach. And now when you're looking at it, you say, okay, why does it look like pink, right? I want to have my custom brand on top of this. And that's where the design system driven themes and how colors are actually configured on each of these components using variables so that you do not have to worry about how this thing works. So let me go back to one of the things which are fully designed. Let me close out of it. And you can switch to the themes tab area. And you can see there are theme cards. They are available here. And I can apply any theme with one click, and it applies it throughout the app without ever having to worry about changing. Okay, I want this to be blue, I want this to be green. But if you want to do that, that's also okay. Because when I select that particular component and I look into my appearance section, you can see the fill color, it says it's a primary 700. And that's how we can standardize what kind of colors are being used throughout this app so that you never have to maintain this locally. And when I try to override it, you see there's a color picker, But you can see the color picker is driven by primary colors, secondary colors, grays, and some other common colors you find inside the application. And the benefit of this is, say that I switch to a completely different theme, say I switch to this one, and I open up my color picker, you see that now it's driven by a completely different color because that color picker is driven by a common theming engine. And this theming engine is application wide. And if you want to create a custom one, all I have to do is create a new theme. And this brings up our theme editor. You can pick between what the base theme is. It could be Material, Fluent, or Bootstrap. You can choose between light and dark. And then when you start picking colors, you can see that there's a palette which is being automatically generated. So say I pick a different color here. Say I pick a purple color. Real time, that theme is generated automatically. I go here, I pick something else like a darker red or a salmon. Generated. I go to my typography. I say I don't want Titanium Web. I want Nuneato Sans. And once I'm done with this, I can name this my Philly theme. Well, I should have picked Eagles color, I suppose. And then it would just run through your entire app, skin it, and apply the theme for the entire particular application. So you never have to worry about this. And now if I go into my color picker, you see that the themes are being generated based on the colors I actually picked, right? Again, everything you create here, let me go a little slower on the code preview side. So this is a theme which is driven by material. So you see it has a very distinct style in how the labels are treated. And this is also baked into the product here. If I switch back to something like Fluent, I go back to my themes, I pick, where's my Fluent here? Not my custom themes, my default themes, and I pick Fluent Light. If I hit preview here, you see that the labels, they are now fixed in position because that's the expectation for Fluent. And depending on your application, you can pick between, do you want this floating label or fixed label, just by picking what the base theme is going to be. And when I hit code, let's look at the code in more detail here. You can see how the buttons are being declared. It says button is of the type flat. It has a color, which is driven by a variable, and all the properties which have been set on top of the button. Similarly, if I go to an input group, you can see that it has the style of the type. It's a border style of input group, and it has a label and text. And if I go back into my component documentation, you look at the code here, it is the exact same code, right? So nothing we generate is going to be mystery, right? We are not creating a black box here. You can see exactly how it's supposed to generate. You can verify it. And that's how we can create a high degree of consistency between what you design, but make it really visual, make it collaborative so that everybody has access to it. And then when you generate it, it looks pixel perfect in terms of both the UI and in terms of the code is actually generating. So we are almost 10 minutes remaining. So what I'm going to do is everything I talked about right now, and if you want to take it for a spin, we have the help topics and the design documentation as videos, tutorials already available for you. So if you go to the main menu here, you'll see there's a watch video tutorials. And here we have all the basic tutorials you need, what I talked about, how to get started, everything I talked about, app layouts, components, themes, everything is baked right into the product itself. So you can actually see, watch and learn and try it out with both the video tutorials and also our sample apps. And then you can click on our help docs. If your videos is not your thing, it'll navigate directly to our help documentation, which also talks about the same concepts, but in textual format. So that kind of summarizes the key capabilities of what App Builder does and how it's a companion and almost sometimes a substitute to the CLI approach Jason was talking about. But the idea here is speed. The idea here is consistency, and the idea here is collaboration.
Sweet. That's awesome, George. Thank you for that demo. Hopefully we have some folks online. It looks like most people have stuck around, so hopefully they're like, "Wow, this is something I could use," and that's what we want. So Ray just asked a question: which language is each of the products developed in? So the code output today is in Angular. Let me share my screen real quick and bring this over. Go down here onto what's next. From a code output perspective, today in the preview, it's Angular. It will be Angular when we ship. And then about 60 days after we ship, maybe 90 days, but around the June timeframe, it will be Blazor. So you can use the same exact, everything George just showed, but when you do preview, it'll be Blazor code. And then it'll be maybe around the same time, it'll be React and Web Component as well. But Angular's first. We want to ship April 1st, and then ship plus 60 to 90 is going to be Blazor, which I think is super exciting. Because if I can take that, open it up in Visual Studio, and I've got my HTML, my CSS, and my C#, and I can do a WebAssembly, boom, that's a game changer. So that's what's coming. Now, the actual product itself is built in Angular with our components. And the model is this. So one of the things we didn't really talk about, but you can directly import a Sketch, Figma, or Adobe XD design into the app builder when we ship. And we have these adapters and parsers that actually generate this common app model. And so the common app model is what you see on the design surface. By the time it's on the design surface, it's basically a JSON object. And then from that JSON object, you can generate any code from that. So Angular we've had for a couple years because we have other tooling that does Angular code generation. So this model is kind of how we're building this whole thing out, which is pretty slick. So that's the way it looks. This is what's coming next in terms of the code output. We're also going to have more data sources. So you saw Excel today. We're going to do JSON, SQL Server, REST. So basically giving you as much as possible so you don't have to write code, because the way we look at this is like a year from now, 18 months from now, you're going to even have to do less after the fact coding. We want to get into that real super low code, maybe no code experience, but still giving you pixel perfect, amazing standards based code. So then you can go and modify it. All these other tools today, it's either crappy code or a black box. And we want to change that. So please send us your feedback. Get a free license. And if you do more, you get more years of free licenses. We want your feedback to make this thing awesome. So the feedback is one path. The whole team monitors that inbox. And then if you look at my email is Jason B. and then George. And then if you want to get these slides, just go ahead here and grab them from the files section on the CodeCamp site. And they're uploaded. It's build apps blazing fast. But with that, we're out of time. Let me check if there's any more questions in the box here. Is there built-in support for? Yeah, it's 100% localizable. In fact, this product has a complete version for Japanese, Spanish, Bulgarian, Russian. We're adding right now Italian, where all the strings are translated, but it's all localizable. So we've done all that work.
But Jason, can you display currency in Bitcoin values?
So Bitcoin has too many zeros after the first digit, so you get an error.
All right, great job, guys. I'm going to stop the recording, and everybody should find their way to another meeting.